Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Imagine 2022 NYC. Today, what we're going to present is this is a point of view, Accenture's point of view. Actually, what the decision makers, which are who's defined the strategy around the automation within your organization. What are the key things which you should consider, which includes the trends and the reference architecture, which we'll be discussing through. Now, before we move, quickly wanted to kind of talk about, I don't know, maybe is there in some app, Rini Das, who was expected to kind of co-present this. She has run into some personal exigency, so she couldn't join, but Dinesh kind of bailed us out at the last moment. So thanks, Dinesh, for that. Quickly introducing me, I'm Vikram Negi, been with Accenture pretty much for 10 years, and overall 20 years in the industry, focusing on the digital transformation space, and have a couple of patents on my, co-inventor. Yeah, so those with me over the journey, we've been kind of able to do that. So quickly moving ahead. Right, so the agenda is going to be mostly around talking through the power of human and machine, which is where we are right now. We've been through, I'll talk about, so I'm actually reading a book that's called Sapiens. I don't know how many of you read it. So that talks about the whole journey of where we are, and obviously that's like more of a, after fact. And followed by, we'll talk about the trends as to, what all different kind of tools, technology, et cetera, which are there and we should be looking at. And then finally, Dinesh is going to take us through the reference architecture, how you could have whatever we'll talk about can be implemented in our respective areas to get the maximum benefit for us. And then finally, case studies. I'm not sure we'll have time enough or we'll cover the case studies, but mostly we'll just skim through and tell you that the, various trends and the reference architectures, when they were implemented in our client environment, what kind of a value we were able to drive out of it. So broadly, that's going to be the agenda. Dinesh, you want to quickly introduce you?
Sure. Good morning. Good to see everyone here. I know there was a lot of traffic while coming, so good to see a packed audience here. My name is Dinesh Masand. I've been part of Accenture for the last almost 17 years in the industry for 22. I'm part of the North America automation and process deployment team, looking at Northeast accounts. I'd like to see all of you.
Thanks, Dinesh. All right, to start with, not really a commercial. So this is a book written by, Paul and James. Paul is our, CTO, and James is our innovation strategy lead. So they've written this book. This talks about a lot about, how the human and machine in the current world, how do they work together? What's the best way to manage them to get the maximum productivity out of it? Now, we've seen, right, so, yeah, so we've seen that, while we've been managing the human workforce over time, so if you go back, maybe 10, 12 years back, we were looking at, managing our people, which is our workforce, which were humans, and clubbed with basic automation, which we'll talk through as we move along, maybe something like a macro script moving along, going to the RPAs and today's world of AI, right? So all through the journey, we've been managing our people. Now they've come together with machines. What is the best way, how you could look at them, manage them together to get the maximum potential they bring together as a unit. So that's all there in detail in the book. I would suggest, this is all available on Amazon. You should try, buy it, read it. It's a great book. I'll be covering the same, briefly covering the same thing, but yeah, if you want to go into the details, the book is there for you. Now, talking about, and going back in time, let's say 30,000, 50,000 years back, right, which is where humans, as such, kind of started using the tools, which started with igniting fire and kind of, getting to, cook your food, if I were to call it. Now, with that, that was the day when the tools started to kind of work with humans and help them. And where we are is because of that fire, which happened by fluke or somebody kind of created it. But that led us to save time. We did not spend time on digestion, which we were doing back then. So we couldn't digest the food because it was uncooked, and we couldn't do the things which we could. Now, that was the first point when the automation really began, right? And then we've been able to save times of ourselves. Now we cook the food, it's a cooked food. We don't have to spend the whole time digesting. We can consume more calories, and that calories gives enough. And by the way, just to share with you, the maximum amount of energy of our body goes into, our brain, managing our brain. So that is what happened. So, they were able to cook the food. Now you have less time of digest. You could eat more, consume more calories, and feed your brain. And this is where we are because of something which happened maybe by fluke some 50,000 years back, right? And this is the only race out of all humans, which is sapiens, which is standing here and talking today. Now, that's the human. And human, since then, has been innovating. And by innovation, what they do is they create machines and pass on the work, which is mundane, which can be automated to the machines. So essentially, what we have to look at is, in our respective organization, managing human and machine together to get the maximum potential out of it, right? And as I said, there are details available in the book. If you go into details, you'll figure that out. But mostly, if you look at humans till date, has been focusing on innovating, working closely with machine, and unleashing the potential of this thing. Now, as we talk, you would see that there are tools, et cetera, which are there, which club together. You know, how do you manage the workforce? Now, within Accenture, we have something we refer to as an ACC, Automation Command Center. Automation Command Center, how it helps is, it's got a view to the humans, he's got a view to the machines, and put together what are they doing, right? That's one basic question which has been there for years. Now, what it helps is, it has got autonomous processes where it is able to figure out, you know, what is the best way to get the maximum potential out of the both of them put together, which means where the handoff should happen, is the handoff happening rightly, can the piece which human is doing right now, can that be moved to the right side of the table, which is, you know, machines kind of taking up that work. So that's been beautifully done. Maybe, you know, if you have interest, please reach out to us on Chaos. We can take you through what the ACC is, how it kind of delivers the potential, and how we are able to get the maximum benefits out of it. Essentially, it's a cockpit. It's an intelligent cockpit. What it does is, it not only tells you what's happening, but it advises how you could get the maximum potential of these two put together, moving things from the left-hand side, which is human, to the right-hand side, which is the machines. I'll take a pause. Any questions if one has? All right, I see a few seconds left for this slide. All right, so moving to the next one. I'll grab some water. Sorry for this. All right, so as we move along, this is a view which tells us where we started in the automation journey, which is probably 8-9 years back, starting from the macros and the basic scripts, moving along, doing the basic process automation. And if you look at this initial part, took us long, right? And obviously, because at that point in time, we couldn't think that there is something which could be done intelligently by machine, which is what we're doing. And as we moved along, we started some 4-5 years back, and you see the trajectory has changed completely, right? So we were very slow, and then RPA came in, and this whole thing kind of looks very different. Now, as we talk, we've got autonomous processes. Hyper automation is the thing which we are doing. AI is pretty much, you know, a thing of past now, right? So this is where we are. If you look at from the foundation, moving to the advanced, and you know, these are, and yeah, this is a very interesting thing. Like we were talking about the Homo sapien example earlier. Now, interestingly, what has happened over time is two things. One, humans are evolving into, you know, being able to do more complex work or innovate. And then we have machines which are kind of delivering that. In the process, if we look at, if this whole trajectory we look at, not only we have evolved, the tools, the platforms have evolved, which probably, you know, we're working towards making them do what they're doing. But essentially, overall, you know, the landscape, if you look at, all the platforms have evolved from a basic, what they could offer to where they are, and moving towards an autonomous, you know, kind of an automation. So that's where tools have evolved, and so has we. And, you know, talking about autonomous processes, and this is something an interesting area, and, you know, Dinesh kind of comes from that area specifically. And we've seen in our, you know, where we're delivering, we've seen that IT automations are the easy wins. Now, we do have, you know, driverless cars, etc. But then those are the examples which, you know, we'll not talk about. But Dinesh, do you want to quickly cover one of these autonomous processes which you would have delivered in your space? Sure.
So I think in the world of IT operations, it's very common, basically looking at service management part of it, right? So we do have tools that you can integrate with, where from the source to the target, you can look at the process from end to end. You could actually look at, you know, incidents, service requests, change management, problem tickets, typically in the IT world, right? I mean, that's what we do all the time in the service space. But looking at trying to automate the whole end-to-end process from starting from the source, looking at, you know, what happens at the source side, trying to analyze using machine learning, AI components, right? Looking at pattern recognitions, rule-based automation, and then going into a paradigm where you can do, you know, self-learning, using machine learning, of course, and artificial intelligence, but also doing end-to-end transformation of that process. So it's basically trying to remove the human element of L1 support, L2 support, right, where the whole start to finish is really stitched together. So I think that's one of the examples that we frequently see apply to different industries and different clients.
Right. And the intention being that we are moving towards this. Right now we do have RPAs, and maybe in some pockets we might be doing macros as well as we talk. But then we're moving towards autonomous processes where you've got sensories, these sensors can sense, and they can decide how the automation, or it should self-heal, it should self-do things instead of coming back to human for some kind of inputs. So that's where we're moving. Hyper-automation. Personally, I would say we are, in real life, delivering most of it is hyper-automation and less of automation, autonomous processes, because that's where we want to move. But as we talk, this is what we're doing. And recently, one of our insurance clients, we've implemented a solution where we've been getting benefits of the tune of hundreds of, people being redeployed to something which is more intelligent by bringing a workflow engine, by bringing an AI element of, document ingestion, extracting the content from the document. So it's an end-to-end sort of, if you were to file a claim, you could start from there, getting the documents, talking to the customer, exchanging messages, et cetera, reading that, and then essentially filing a claim. And then there is a later part of servicing the claim. So where I'm going at is, right now, hyper-automation is something which is active, live, at pace, being delivered, and where we want to be is autonomous processes. That's the way forward, and it is there in some form or other, but that's still picking up, and that's where we see, in coming years, that's where we will be. All right, I'll move ahead. Now, taking a cue from human, machine, and where we want to be, what are the key trends which, as an Accenture, notices working with its clients, right? So there are 7 key trends which I will talk through, and hyper-automation I just talked about, right? So this is something which is active, and we believe this is something where we're actually implementing. The most of the work which is happening is in this direction, not in a sense of innovation, but an implementation. So the delivery is happening in hyper-automation, but then you have the autonomous processes, which is an innovation area which we are also working in parallel. That being said, hyper-automation essentially would, that's one bucket as a trend you might want to look at it. But then if you understand this further, these are the rest of the 7 things, which is what is getting addressed in hyper-automation. I'll come back to hyper-automation. I'll spend some time on that. I'll come back to that once we're done with this part of it. Now, starting with the citizen developer. Now, this is something which we've, and I'm going back in time when we started, right? So we had the back office processes, and we wanted to figure out, how do we do it at a lesser cost, faster maybe. And that's where, we have that labor arbitrage kind of playing in. And then we moved ahead. We started, programs within the organization of looking at the ideas, right? So creating some systems that people can log in, that this is how I work. And possibly if this drop-down could be sitting somewhere else, my job could be faster. So, we started with that, people giving ideas. Those ideas were implemented by Dinesh and people like me who work in IT, and we get paid because they don't have the tools to kind of automate that. Now, that's all changing now. And Dinesh and I are moving to the autonomous process side now. So yeah, going back to this. So now what's happening is with the citizen developer, what we see is there's low code, no code, various other arsenals being given to the people who are on the ground working. And really, we may be coming from different spheres, and especially the people on the automation side as an IT professionals and offering automation as a service, right? So those are the people, if you look at, what do? We get to understand the requirement. One of us is doing something, and we try to understand what the requirements are. And it's practically impossible that all the knowledge and all the information I need from you to enable you it's practically not possible. I'll miss out on something. I may be hitting 99.9 for all you know, right? But I cannot be 100%. So making the citizen developer enabled with the tools and arsenal on the fly for him to develop what he wants to automate, that's something which is right now happening, and that should be the focus area for the CXO sitting here while you're defining your strategy, planning, etc. within your organization. Our suggestion is this is an area which has to be tapped. Yes, it comes with a lot of risk, etc. because you may not have all the controls right now in place, because you may have some data which you don't want to go to cloud, and that to be written by somebody who doesn't understand the coding as a practice, how it should be. But then This is getting covered with the low-code, no-code platforms, and people kind of learning. There are various controls being built so that it is controlled. But at the end, this is one trend we're seeing, and this is going to definitely, it's one area which is going to lead to a lot of benefits in near future. Low-code, no-code platform, that's pretty much a subset of citizen developer. This is low-code, no-code is twofold. One, obviously, it helps the citizen developer to kind of, develop things faster, and he's able to, first of all, able to deliver. But then secondly, it also helps people like Dinesh and I. So, we till now have been writing codes in Javas and the C++, C++, etc. And that takes a lot of time. With the low-code, no-code solutions or platforms coming our way, we are able to deliver 10x faster the same thing. So it's beneficial to the IT professionals. Quite a number of them are here. And also the business folks, we would have some people from the domain side of the things. So that's another area which is an adoption area where we see and suggest our CXOs should be moving towards. Then, process mining. Now, till now, I was talking about, we talked about the citizen developer. He's doing things, and he sees that, if this happens differently, then I could be doing much more than what I'm doing right now, and maybe focusing on more intelligent work than really something which is mundane and repeatable, right? So with the process mining and task mining, these kind of solutions, they are very critical to get to the next level of identifying the opportunity within our area or work area. So what it means is, I could connect to a system which you're talking to. Let's say you're working on an ERP system, let's say SAP or another one, and I could have the process mining tool sitting and talking to the logs, which are various logs which are getting generated to understand, right, what this person is doing, right? And as a group, what are we doing? And what's the opportunity? Is this person doing the things in the best possible manner, which others are not doing? Is there a way I could figure out or, industrialize the way these teams are working, could bring a standard process, which is the right way of execution and getting the maximum benefit? So again, process mining is an area. And again, tying it back to the way, 3 or 4 years or maybe 5 years back, when, I would go talk to someone, he'll tell me this is my process, I'll do some process diagnostic and come out with some brilliant idea and say, what, this can be automated, now you get a 20% benefit. Now with process mining, I do away from that. It was not humanly possible for me to get to that level because there's a communication which is happening, there are lags, we miss out things. With process mining, directly going to the tool, getting the nth level of the detail, and having already been tapped to the space, which is talked between, with the communication between the people who are doing and who has to kind of enable that. So with this is another area which we see is being focused on, and as you go through this 2-day, there are various sessions where we will see, even Mihir talked about process mining area. There are some relationship which has been built between Automation Anywhere and Salinas. That's one area you'll get to hear. Fortress IQ, which is a recent acquisition by Automation Anywhere, that's focused on the task mining. So all of those is going to be covered in different sessions. So my suggestion would be you should look for spending some time there, because that's a trend which we're seeing is something which our CXOs are focusing on, and our suggestion is to continue to focus on these areas. Moving ahead, multi-platform orchestration. This is in, now again, if you look at it in isolation, this may appear like not very different from hyper-automation. Well, it is. So in a multi-platform orchestration, there's still now, if we go back and we talk about SAPs of the world, there is a basic automation we will do, basic flow we'll build that, I get something and there is a rule which I build and I say, anything more than 50,000 is something Bikram cannot do and Dinesh can do. Those kind of basic orchestration. Now what we're talking about here is there are multiple platforms, multiple vendors, they are coming together. So Dinesh uses a different system, I use a different system. Can I build an orchestration layer between this system to kind of have the whole end-to-end journey played out? So that's an area where there's a lot of work which is happening. We see, we've got, in fact, Microsoft itself, the Power Platform offers that kind of a capability. You have various connectors talking to these systems and having an end-to-end kind of a flow built in. So it's another area where we would see, and while I go through this, you would realize that number of things are overlapping in these, right? So the moment I get to, and that's why the ecosystem is developing all together. So what it means is, you have a multi-platform solution. What it does is it lets you talk to various platforms. At the same time, what I'm doing is I'm bringing citizen developers. So now what I'm doing is I am giving this citizen developer a capability to integrate these systems because of the low-code, no-code solution and getting to a multi-platform orchestration layer. So this is where, if you look at it, they in isolation are a trend, but they are growing together and they are overlapping and complementing each other, which is where the overall benefit is going to come down. Moving further, mainstream AI, I'll not spend a lot of time out here. I think we'll all be, everyone here would have done some kind of a training certification on this. That's been the thing. So I'll not spend a lot of time, but this is an area we all understand. There's a lot of data sitting with us. Let's figure out a way to understand what this data is, or in fact, we shouldn't. We should build a program which should understand the data and tell you what the thing should be, which is obviously this is an area where we continue to focus on. Finally, now this is a factor which we've been trying to address over time, right? So right from day one, initial days, the intent was to build a system and, it should work. It should functionally meet the requirements. Now it's all about adoption. And we've seen with a lot of our clients, we built such complex problems were solved with a solution, eventually to realize that there is a low adoption of the tool. Or the whole solution has a low adoption. Why? Because what was overlooked was the need is not just automation. The need is for this consumer to get benefit out of this. And that's where this is one area where there's a lot of focus right now Accenture has. And I wouldn't say now, it's been last 3 to 4 years has been an area where we've kind of put in a lot of efforts. And there's a book released by our Chief Strategy Officer, Bhaskar Ghosh. It kind of focuses on this area as well. So if you will talk about that in the later slides. So broadly, I wanted to touch upon the various trends. We talked about the human machines, how human and machines coming together, and kind of complementing the trends together. So we covered all of that. I'll let Dinesh kind of take over and explain how all of this, what I talked about, is applied in various areas. Dinesh.
Thank you. So Bikram, so far covered, the first 3 slides talk about, what is human-machine relationship, how are we interacting now in a new age and new time, right? We talked about what is happening in the industry from an evolution point of view, right? Looking at 30 years, 40 years back to where we are today, how the evolution of technology stack, right? And all these trends have emerged. But putting a perspective or, looking at holistically, how does everything now start coming together from an end-to-end automation point of view, right? I mean, for us to be successful, you have to go beyond doing basic task-based automation, looking at the entire enterprise landscape from departments to LOBs to different divisions within your organization, right? So really, the continuum or the continuous integration of these technologies or the themes that we had on the earlier slide is really where the next leap of faith is happening. So it's basically, if you look at process mining that Bikram touched upon, is really looking at processes within your organization, business processes, IT processes. I know IT business are 2 fundamental pillars of any organization. But looking at process space and going deep down, horizontally and vertically both, to identify where the bottlenecks are from that operations point of view. So really looking at process end to end is where the focus is from starting your journey. Then as a next step, you would start identifying areas that you want to look at, whether it's task-based automations to start with, because that's where you really look at your task, mini task, making of the broader process, so to speak, where you start automating these repeatable items into using RPAs and some of these tools that exist in the market today. So RPA was specially designed or catering to that market. Of course, coming to RPA was actually micro on steroids, right? I mean, it was really doing some local work that you would always do, and RPA would help you automate and bring up the scale and efficiency in that process. But you're going beyond, right? You're looking at processes and RPAs to integrate your underlying ecosystem and the app space therein. You are now looking at intelligent automation, which is really looking at pattern-based, rule-based automation. Now, the paradigm is to look at how do you introduce intelligence, which is the artificial or machine learning or cognitive or using some of these NLPs, NLG engines. Look at interaction, which is more cognitive, where the machines make their judgments versus the human making. The humans come into some complex decision making, but the machines are getting enabled in that process to look at decision making, so that you can start creating an ecosystem which is more intelligent, and humans are evolved in some of the complex decision making. So really, all this put together is coming together. I think cloud infrastructure or the cloudification has enabled all this journey or enablement at speed and scale, of course, because now you have different systems. I mean, whether it's Amazon, Google, Microsoft, doesn't matter what's under the covers, right, today. Everything comes together naturally. And the focus of all these vendors, including Automation Anywhere, is how do you now scaling up? It's almost cloud agnostic at this point, right? I mean, in that sense, you could have a preference for different capabilities of a cloud, but cloud has kind of brought about that change so that you can start building on top of these building blocks. You can start integrating from end to end, and really looking at it's all these technologies holistically coming together. So that's where the hyper automation is nothing but summation of all these themes and all these areas or pockets now starting to cohesively coming together and making your organizations or your departments more efficient, more leaner, more agile. And of course, there's Gartner study that we are going beyond RPAs at this point, right? It's RPAs, I think, are more in the core or the fabric of your organizations now. It's really looking at the intelligent automation piece of it, which is trying to take it to the next level, right? So that's all about, putting all these technologies together. And of course, there is a cost element to the whole thing. As you start increasing your digital workforce, there will be optimization in what humans workforce or coexist. They will coexist, but how do you operationalize and make machines more efficient, which will definitely have an impact on the cost levers as well. So that's the end-to-end automation, how everything really stitches together from our perspective, right? And of course, that's where the industry is today. So as C-level people in this room, and of course business leaders in your respective areas, we want to look at what are the key levers or key areas that you would like to look at, right? I mean, everybody has a starting point, but as you evolve into that journey, what are the key factors that your areas, right? I mean, as automation leaders, will or should be helping you take those decisions and enabling the journey that you and your organization has started. So really, I think what we have seen from the left-hand side is the imperatives. Really, it's more business-led versus IT-led. Business-led convergence and emerging of ideas makes it more impactful, right? What we've seen is if you start versus tech-led or technology-based approach, business-led approach leads to more benefits on the ground. And it leads to natural convergence of different enterprise departments coming together, trying to holistically solving. So that should be the end state, but I think starting from the business problem, trying to go down, and then using the IT fabric as an enabler to the whole thing is really where the trend or the focus should be. In that process, we talked about looking at all your processes from intelligent process mining, really looking at vertical processes, whether it's banking, financial, insurance, right? Whatever your domain you come from, but looking each of them has discrete and distinct processes, so to speak. And that's where I think some of these bottlenecks can be resolved. But I think not only relying on humans, but I think there are tools like Vikram talked about, Selenius, right? Or even Fortress IQ. There are tools in the market space that actually go and do some value mapping for you in terms of where does the value of automation belong and where can you actually start, using machine learning or even intelligence that some of these tools provide to identify areas that you can logically pick up for automation. So really looking at intelligent process mining definitely is one prerogative that I think all business leaders would try to maximize impact. Then of course you want to be more holistic, look at end-to-end versus task-based. You start task-based, you start small, you start scaling, you start ramping up, but you have to look at the bigger picture from an end-to-end automation point of view. It's not only discrete, it's like process and stitching the whole fabric around it, right? So really looking at end-to-end is where maximizing the benefit kind of accentuates, right? And of course, hyper-automation we talked about, you cannot exist in a silo anymore, right? It's all about integrating various technologies. Most of the big organizations have multiple technology stacks, and it becomes a nightmare at times, right? Maintaining them and sustaining them, so to speak. But I think the need of the hour, or for some of these platforms, the direction that the industry is moving is how do you coexist, how do you integrate together, how do you interoperate together, right? So really that's where hyper-automation and of course, coming of these platforms is where the focus of the industry is to make it more scalable. And of course, you want to look at defining policies because as you evolve into this, you want to have security, data, privacy policies in place, because your machines and human beings are going to coexist in that space. So you want to have a certain amount of policies that determine how you construct that ecosystem, monitor it, and of course govern it from that point of view so that you can make sure that there's an aspect of talent management. I think there's a session on talent management of how in the new age we're looking at machines and human beings coexisting. So then aspect of, or almost a topic of talent management. And if you have time tomorrow, feel free to. But Accenture has a point of view, and that's where, virtual, right, plus human talent management, I think, is the next focus area that we're looking at. And on the other side, really it's, like I said, it's looking at intelligent automation, not only plain vanilla style automation, looking at some of, these levers. So some sample use cases would be to look at your end-to-end process document, looking at, using RPAs or OCRs for character recognition, using NLPs for making sense of that data, right? So natural progression language, even integrating, if you understand that communication out to your customer service or your end customer, looking at NLG to construct some letters for you or mails for you. So I think there's an evolution and a paradigm shift that's happening, which is integrating all these so-called, futuristic technologies, trying to solve the problems that we have today. This is again a slide that is Accenture's point of view, how for all practitioners here and of course business leaders in the room, what is it that you could do within your organization, right? So Accenture has a point of view in terms of its 2 levels, right, that we're talking about. But it's more of a reference architecture. How do you go about doing this? Well, we talked about a lot of content in terms of what exists and how it's coming together. But if you were to start your journey and look at pieces of information so that you can start standing up some of this, is really where we have a point of view. So this is broken down into almost 8 categories, I would say. It's actually 8 logical steps to try to construct or maybe stand up your organization operating model or execution model around some of these RPA technology stacks and the platforms on automation and leading up to hyper automation. So really, starting from the top, if you would start as if you have a multi-channel, which today I think is very common. It's multi-channel, engagement style with all, whether it's web-based, whether it's mobile, right? So you have an omni-channel engagement channel on the business process side, typically, where you're interacting with your end customers. So you have your starting point to understand where your processes are really, starting from that human interaction. That's the visible processes, so to speak. There's a back-end side of the process, but that's where you start your journey from front-ending the customer, so to speak. So you start with omni-channel, looking at which areas you want to focus on, right, and start concentrating or identifying areas from a human interaction. What is it that you're doing today? How do you go into observing, discovering some of these processes, time and motion studies, right? Where's the time really is being spent? Because that's where you start identifying your process automation ideas. So really looking at process discover, looking at interact and engage. So really how do all these communication styles, right, whether it's using chat, queries, emails that we are very used to nowadays, making sense of the data, of course, is a separate science or data science topic by itself, but using NLPs or NLGs to understand the data per se that's going behind all this is important. So how do you observe the data? How do you interact and engage with your customers or internal stakeholders or external stakeholders is where I think you should be looking at next. Then, of course, you're looking at collecting all this information, whether it's document. A lot of data today is in the form of structured and unstructured data. So you want to look at your documents, you want to look at your emails, and there's explosion of data. So you want to have your data governance, data processes, data security elements in place to look at this data that is really coming out of the first 3 items, right? And then, of course, you move on into making some sense, whether it's inference reason using manual techniques or using some of the automation / artificial intelligence tools and stack. You start inferring, understanding, and deciding on what do you want to do next. And really that leads to your automation and orchestrate. And that's where you really start putting all these ideas. So it's really a funnel that you're trying to, from an end-to-end starting point, looking at your ideas, how do you go about implementing them, and then how do you about standing up your processes around to make these interactions seamless and cohesive. And then, of course, not to forget that each automation has a performance KPI. It's trying to solve a business problem in the industry or in your respective areas. So you're going to have a continuous monitoring, management of that linked to your performance KPIs. Now, this is a level 2 version, which is how do you break this into more discrete items from that process that we talked about on the high level. But this is really looking at, and I'll really not drain the slide here, but it's giving you a point of view of what are the different things. And of course, there will be level 3 and level 4 as you start peeling the onion here or start peeling or going under the covers. But really, this is Accenture's point of view of where some of the components that you should start focusing on. So I'll pause here. I've talked for the last few minutes. Any questions?
Dinesh, you mentioned about all the different application layers and application foundations. Where is this chat are we trying to integrate in intelligent automation area? Is it to trigger the bot from the chat bot, or is it like a separate that will be integrated as part of the intelligent automation?
It could be both. It could be both, right? I mean, typically a customer service representative would interact with the client. So you go to google.com, you have a problem, you have the ability to call them, you have the ability to chat with them. How does the interaction happen, right? It's all text-based, it's all NLP, it's natural language that you're communicating in the chat box before the human actually comes into picture. So you want to actually have the data as well to look at so that you can analyze and make sense of it, because some of the data could be repeating themselves. You could actually start solving them automatically versus having a human element involved, right? So that's where the intelligence starts growing over. Of course, these are all training models that you have to, spend time training and building them up. But that's where the interaction can definitely.
And maybe, the way you might want to also look at it that, see, essentially when we automate, machines would be a system or an actor. Humans usually would be an actor. Obviously, they have processing, but that's an action coming out of it. Now, a chatbot is a classic example, right? So that could be an actor as a responding to your query. It could be a system. What it means is it is going, processing, triggering something. So that's where your question was, and it kind of takes care of both of the elements out there. So most of the machine elements, they could act like an actor, and obviously they have that system component to that.
Just a follow-up question. So how is this chatbot integrated with the data security? Because as a human, I can type any information which is like a sensitive data. How this chatbot comes with the data security?
That's an interesting question, and we get this question all the time when we propose any solution to most of our clients, right? So see, one, and that's been our thinking, that number one, a system has no interest in doing something, a personal interest. Let's say, as a human, I may have an interest that somehow I do something and don't go to jail, and I still have some money coming to my bank account without any challenges, right? So I have that interest. Machine doesn't have any of those interests, right? The only way it can go wrong is when you design the machine to go wrong, right? So with that, the element of the risk, the first element of the risk is taken off the table. That's one. Now, the real problem is the storage, where the data is going, how it is going, and we understand now that there are technologies which are available which can encrypt the data, which obviously there can be breaches, but then there is a strong platforms, technologies, etc. available to account for the risk. That being said, we're still not in an era where we would say, what, there's a chatbot, let's go implement it. This is it'll do what it has to do. Secondly, there is a communication layer which has a TLS 1.2 or whatnot, and we're all covered. So not that. So we still are evolving to that era, right? So to answer your question, are we there right now? Maybe not, but are we getting there slowly? Yes, right? The answer 5 years back to getting a system implemented which has a banking data, you will have to go through so much of, it used to take us 6 months to get an approval from the client and their IT security. Now with things evolving, people getting to know, yes, it works, right? It's real. So it may be happening in a few days, but yes, this is an area which will continue to be there because there is a risk, and our belief, our positioning is systems have lower risk as compared to humans. Obviously because they don't have any vested interest around kind of getting this thing.
Thank you. And you get a book for asking a question. Any other questions? We showed you a book in the front, right? On the start of the deck, there was a book. There's one more book at the end, but if you ask a question, you get a book. So please feel free to ask more questions. Okay. So I think in the interest of time, I think
if we have time, maybe we want to go back to, and that's an interesting view we've looked at, right? And maybe try and tee up with some real life example, right? So maybe a slide back. One more. Yeah. So now this is what we talk about as an adoption of, we've said that, okay, there is something called trends, there is something called low code, no code, there is something citizen developer, everything in the world. Now, this is a reference architecture. Where does all of those things we talked about is sitting in this? Right? That should be a question, and which gets explained in the reference architecture post this slide. I was just trying to pick up one of the real life example or a solution we've been proposing to our clients and give you a view, and this goes back to the insurance space, right? I got to file a claim, so it's a first notice of loss I got to file for. Now what I do is I have various channels. I could go through a web interface, file a request. I could maybe drop an email. I could give a phone call. And there's some guy sitting and addressing these three, communication. There's a document which is not completely filled, so I need to go back and tell you that, you fixed this document. I got to comprehend that document. So if you look at, for a common man, this cannot be done by system, right? Reading, understanding, all of that. Now, if you look at...
Did we lose it?
All right. So, if you look at what we are able to do with the same, though I wish that slide was still there. But that said, so yeah, would have made it easier for all of us to comprehend. But that being said, so, the beginning of the thing is that, I go and send a note. Now, that's as an actor, I have to file a claim and 3 modes of, information being given to be processed, right? Now, what I could do is I plug in my chatbot. Now, what is the chatbot doing is it is directly understanding your, what your requirement is. In fact, giving you answer right there and then and letting you process that. That's where the chatbot, NLP, NLUs come into play. And similarly, you could have a situation where I'm sending an email. Now, this email has to be comprehended. Now, you may have a document ingestion kind of a solution in place. What it's going to do is extract the information, comprehend the information, tell you whether that information is sufficient or not, send you an email, get that information back to you, read it again, and then go and file it. Now, all of this being said, you could have an RPA plug. For, in a perfect world, we wouldn't need an RPA as a bandage to kind of, bridge between 2 systems, right? But you still live in that era where you still have, those old mainframes and legacy systems. You have an RPA plug coming in, picking all that information which the document ingestion system has extracted and given to you for filing a claim, really. So the point I'm trying to bring up is, when we look at those trends, those platforms, etc., in isolation, they may look like, okay, how they're going to talk to each other in a single solution. The example I'm giving you is where those all systems which we just talked about is being used. And to add to that, there are human elements out here, right? So obviously, at present, it's not that the document ingestion can extract everything. It can extract German written by me. Absolutely not. It's not going to read German written by me. So that's where you have that, human piece coming in. They come in, and they also have a few screens to play around with. They also have a low-code, no-code capability to go and figure out a way. So for all you know, I read German written by Bikram, right? I am the best person to say how you could read Bikram's, German. Now, for that, I am best placed. If I had the right arsenals, I am best placed to write that logic and make that engine kind of extract that. The point being, all of these things coming together and these arsenal being given to us as a, people who are proposing solution, people who are strategizing for their organizations, and even the people who are processing. This is where the future lies, and this is where the next level of benefits we are going to look at.
Thank you, Vikram. And I think we are right on time. We had a few case studies that we wanted to just showcase. Of course, there are more in the pack. We'll be at the kiosk, right, for next 2 days. So feel free to drop by. But I think these are case studies where some of these concepts or, things that we discussed in the earlier slides have been, brought to light in respective areas, right? So this is a consumer good organization where we made a value from, if you look at, bots, process optimize, the savings. So really, this is more to show you where Accenture played a role and helping out a client with a problem statement using the technologies that we talked about in the earlier space. So this was more in the business process side of things because this is looking at finance, procurement, IT processes, so to speak, in that department or in that company. And the next was more of, I think it was one of the financial clients that we had, where we looked at their IT operations. They came to us looking at different areas that they had problems to solve with. And of course, we managed to work with the stakeholders, with the organizations to identify the right processes, make a value plan or value mapping plan, and then of course drive to implementing those ideas. So that's really the value we derived using a combination of some of the technologies we talked about. Any questions before?
Sorry,
any questions that you have? Anyone would like to ask?
Just curious, like your case study here too. What's your timeline to the delivery of this? How you get to your
So I think it varies. Depending on the organization we're dealing with, small, medium, large, right? I mean, some of the organizations today are more nimbler, agile in terms of processes, how they go about governing data, privacy, security. it could get very difficult in some of the bigger ones, right? Depending on the layers of approvals and whatnot. But I think we can collaborate and see. So I would say it depends on different clients and the appetite for risk and moving at a faster pace.
And I have to add to that, what we've observed, it's in how mature and as an organization we are, how risk averse we are, right? So that's where it lands. You go to a banking client, he's going to say, you know what, this is not making any sense. You go to Uber, they're going to say, yeah, let's do something new, different, fast. So it depends, where you stand in the journey.
So in your experience that you all have done for machine learning, AI, bots, on an average, in your successful use case, how long has it taken to implement?
So, obviously there is no straight answer, and you shouldn't be holding me for this, but it could take anywhere between, we've seen, nothing happens for 3 months, assuming that every solution is agreed, aligned. It has a lot of, to and fro's. Let's say you've gone off for a week and you're the solution architect sitting on the other side, it's delayed by a week. So keeping that out, once the solution is firm, usually medium complexity solution could happen within 3 months. And to really get the benefit out of it, depending on how much of an AI is there, because there's a lot of data. Do you have the data? Is data getting generated? It may take even 3 years for you to kind of reap the real benefits. Yeah.
How did you capture and identify 100 use cases? And would you consider this collection of use cases the end-to-end automation, or did you have multiple end-to-end automation processes for this particular use case?
So I think it's a combination. Right, it was combination. I mean, you start discrete level. I mean, when you go into a field, depending on the client, whether they have prior experience, whether they've done this before, depending on the landscape really from a technology stack, you would look at discrete processes first, with the end goal becoming the end-to-end, right? So you would actually have a mix. I mean, the 100 use cases would be a mix of both areas, but ultimately the end goal is to get a more end-to-end kind of process integration where real benefits start emerging out.